Okay, so here we are. It's Monday, and welcome to another LinkedIn Live. This week is exciting because it's just not me chatting away for 45 minutes on the future of retail. So we have a first guest. So on Going Live LinkedIn with, and we've got Adrian Nyman from Nike, Vice President of Creative Director of Global Visual, joining us this week. So it's so exciting that Adrian's joining us to talk about all things retail and the future of kind of this industry and what we do and everything. So Adrian, it's a pleasure for you to join me. I'm kind of probably like my daughter, sort of a bit starstruck about if she met any of the sort of famous people. But for you in kind of this industry, it's certainly a pleasure because it's been following kind of everything that you've been doing and obviously your team's been doing. So it's great for you to join us.
Tim, thanks for having me. I'm obviously a huge fan of a lot of the content you post, and just your voice and your perspective is, I would say you are a kindred spirit. A lot of the things that you call attention to and that you champion through creativity, I feel like we are very on the same page. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to have a conversation and just share some thoughts and some energy about the future and about future experiences and retail and kind of where the industry's going. Just a quick update on recently I've exited Nike, so as of last month. So I just want to tell the audience that I'm excited for the next opportunity. We could probably talk about that a little bit later, but yeah, I just want to kind of hit that off.
Yeah, perfect. And I think it was Adrian sent me a fantastic podcast that he did with Origins Unknown, which if you want to kind of get more in, I'll put a link out after this video, but if you want to kind of get into Adrian's brain and his experiences, it really resonated with me, both from a sort of personal and professional side in terms of the sort of thought processes we go through as kind of creative individuals, really. So as always, if you have any questions or thoughts or anything you want to ask me or Adrian, then ping them in the comments and we will kind of get them up in the discussion. I've had loads of kind of questions before this, so it's been great to kind of get an understanding of what those are. So I think we might as well kick it off sort of topically and sort of talk about, we've got a lot of recent news here in the UK at the minute. Topshop or Arcadia Group is kind of undergoing sort of, whether it's going into administration, which is a huge thing for us here in the UK. But kind of, it seems that retail hit that crucial moment. And where do you think your sort of personal thoughts on where the future of the physical store is?
Yeah, that's a titan of industry to say the least. I mean, so many of us have had a relationship with the brands, and it's almost like incomprehensible, right? And I think it's just another wake up call that even brands that we love that are too big and have been handcuffed to the past and maybe have carried forward a lot of baggage. This is a moment in time where they're not able to make this transition, which is interesting because usually the brands that that don't make it are brands that lose a bit of their glamour, a bit of their allure. And we're seeing now brands that we absolutely love filing for bankruptcy, going out of business. And we're seeing that in a way that doesn't quite compute. You know what I mean? So it's a really unique time where we're seeing even the survival of the fittest aren't working. And I think there's one thing I mentioned it a minute ago. The brands that are positioned to be agile and to be able to navigate this new reality without a ton of capital overhead, without a lot of the handcuffs of the past, the brands that are positioned to do that, and the brands that can transition to more of an agile operating system, more of a digital first kind of centric business model, are the ones that are going to be able to emerge on the other side of this. It's sad because we're going to see some brands we love probably go away. That's just the reality. And you know, even at your hometown level, it's even more pronounced with restaurants, right? Like I even see award-winning restaurants. I live in Portland, Oregon, which is a town that's known for food. I mean, places that you could never even get into now haven't been able to manage the transition. So it's not about, I guess my point is this, it's not about how good the brand is. It's how good are they at transitioning their business model and being able to be nimble enough to rethink their distribution model, to rethink their overhead, to rethink the way they operate. And obviously digital is the access point now. That's the life preserver to a lot of these brands. That's really where a lot of the revenue is coming from. So long-term big leases are tough right now.
Yeah, for sure. Is there, what do you think about flexi retail and those kind of things? Where do you sort of see the future lying in? You know, obviously there's loads of incredible pop-ups that are happening globally and mainly in Asia. I think I've seen so many beautiful activations.
I love it. I love you know what, pandemic or no pandemic, I've always loved pop-up as a vehicle to really bring a curated idea to life. To me, a pop-up has always been a great tool that brands have underutilized, in my opinion. So to see a lot of pop-ups happening right now, it's really ripe. You're thinking about, there's a lot of short-term leases that can be signed right now, which makes it very, very appealing to brands that have the wherewithal to do it. But what it does more than anything, and I've said this for the last couple of years, like, look, what the world needs is a point of view. We need ideas, we need stories, and retail experiences, when they can latch on to a story and really go deep on a story, that's where you really, I believe, you see real excitement happen. Yeah. When you live in a world where you can Google anything and see anything at any moment, the physical space has really got to bring a point of view and a curation, because the world's so overloaded with information. The last thing you want to do is go into a space and see a little bit of everything, because it's exhausting as a consumer. So the pop-ups that have been emerging, I feel, are really exciting. I mean, the Dior one that recently, I think, was in China. Yeah. There's just been some really, I thought, clever and thoughtful, and they're giving, retail is really kind of starved for energy right now. So it's kind of a little bit of a beacon, kind of just to, you know, on the horizon.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I suppose what I love about a pop-up is it creates, I call it, my buzzword is a moment, but it creates that sort of moment for a consumer to engage. I don't know, like it kind of creates a reason to visit and
that's right.
Things. And you know, I suppose Supreme have been doing it for years in terms of their drop product model, and you know, guys and girls queue around the block to buy that product. And ultimately, I think that's what we want from, what I think from a retail point of view is about creating that, you know, like you say, you can shop online 24 hours a day.
Totally.
I sat all weekend doing my Christmas shopping, and it's all going to get delivered this week, but I don't feel empowered. I don't feel, you know, excited about it. It wasn't an experience.
I do believe that, like, you know, so what we're seeing right now is the amplification of a lot of behaviors are coming to fruition now, right? So the pandemic is really exacerbating things that were already happening, and now it's changing behavior in a way that it's undeniable. I would say 3 years ago, 4 years ago, a few years ago, whenever, with the what you just said, like, hey, if I need to shop, you know, I need to buy a pair of Air Force Ones, I can be in my bed at night at 10 o'clock and buy those shoes. I know what I want. I know what size I wear. There's really there's nothing stopping you from doing that. And that's a great way. The adverse, or the inverse, I should say, is if you get on a bus, ride it for 20 minutes, walk 3 blocks, in the rain to get to the store, and the proposition is just to buy the same shoe, I don't see what the purpose of the store is, to be perfectly honest. So I do believe that stores now have a higher calling and a bigger purpose. Retail now needs to deliver on a whole new set of KPIs, a whole new measurement of success, where we've got to build worlds with moments and points of view. And when people come into that store, it's so much more than just acquiring the product. It's really about connecting with the brand. It's about entertainment. It's about education. It's about so much more. And this moment is going to force companies, people, creators, it's going to force them to rethink the core value of retail and what kind of investments do I make? Where do I put stores? How big are they? And how do I measure that success? Is it still realistic to say, the gold standard of success was, square meter turn on productivity, on 4-wall P&L? That feels very antiquated now. Like, I feel like the buying journey now is spread across 24 hours a day, any place in the world. So, it's an interesting time.
Interesting point, because in a lot of the conversations we have and I have with people, it's about how would Nike, for example, measure that? What's their sort of metric in measuring something like a house of innovation? Obviously, how would you measure the sort of commerciality of that?
And we absolutely, I would be, I would be lying if I said every brand that has physical retail is still measuring the classic KPIs, conversion, bag size, all those things, right? So yes, those are still important barometers that are referenced, but there's a whole new, beyond Nike, all modern brands, there's a whole new group of KPIs, which is, there used to be this idea that the physical store did its thing and then the digital ecosystem did its thing. And at some points we had this thing called omni-channel where they might connect and have some continuity. That's gone, right? Now the physical store has to sit as the exclamation point of the digital ecosystem. It has to be the best version of the brand. And the way we measure that is through engagement, almost the same way you would measure a social media post. How much engagement are you getting? How much are people talking about it? How many people are liking it? Within the physical space, it's engagement. It's how many people can we convert into our member program? So getting into a logged in state where they are participating with the brand in our social platforms, in our apps, across our whole ecosystem. So there's lots of metrics like that, which actually have far bigger implications, because we now see lifetime value as a big indicator, right? So a consumer's lifetime value now becomes exponentially higher when we connect the digital, the physical, and all these pieces together. So House of Innovation was a great case study of, hey, if we add on some of these new metrics, how do we see that affect the broader, all of New York, all of Shanghai? We see, digital and physical growth happen. We see full marketplace transformations happen. So it's a very exciting time, and the pandemic is only accelerating. It's only accelerating all that.
And the interesting thing is, obviously, here in the UK, we're having a massive sort of resurgence of that local community, or the local high street and the local store. And I think, we've especially had this real negative feel to our local community for a long time. We've pushed everyone out of town shopping, and we've really focused on shopping centres. And how do you sort of see the future of those kind of the kind of retail store estate? How do you see that happen?
I personally hope And I think we all, like, as a society, we push the pendulum to the edges, right? Like, we're not the most, as a group of people, we really like to go to the extremes, right? So it's all malls or nothing. It's all high street or nothing. And in those extremes, we lose what we later, I hope, realize are the important things of community, of more of the individual voice. So when we think about more of the mom and pop shops, more of the curated, personal, sole proprietor type of space, I think there's a new hybrid of that where you've got a mix of brands as well as community-led doors. I think the brands have to figure out, if you're going to put a global brand into a neighborhood, you need to modulate your tone. You need to figure out how that brand is going to show up in an authentic way. You're not saying, you're not changing the brand, but House of Innovation for Nike is a very big kind of high top Cirque du Soleil type of event where it's broadcast level, very hyper engaging. That's not appropriate in a small community. So brands have to figure out how do they modulate the tone for quieter spaces, for more intimate conversations, and how do you become more human? I think there's going to be a giant resurgence of that space as we see. I don't think anyone has a plan for malls. I think what I do know is humans and the behavior and the desire of connecting with each other and shopping, that's not diminishing. Mm-hmm. We're in a kind of a holding pattern right now because of the pandemic, but I do believe that in the short to near future, as we get back to more of a safe human to human existence, shopping will play an important role. I think we're going to really support those neighborhood level stores again. And I think brands are going to have to figure out how do they authentically fit into those spaces in a way that's welcoming the community, giving the community a voice and a place to be heard and to participate, but still also being authentic to their brands, whoever they are. So I think it's a really exciting space.
Yeah, for sure. Everything kind of together. These things that we've talked about and probably been looking at for a long time is everything begins to merge into one sort of story, and the fact that you can talk to different people on different levels is really exciting. I think.
Yeah.
We talk about it, but we used to the sort of clone town. The idea of that you would have one concept you would deliver wherever you did. It feels really antiquated now. It feels really old-fashioned. I delivered that for a number of brands, and I think that's obviously, went out cookie cutter.
Yep.
And that was the strength of the brand at the time, and it was really strong. Actually, now, like you say, we all want to experience different things, and each demographic and each town and each high street and everything has its own specific consumer, and it's playing with that real mix of that demographic and those people really.
I think if you go back to the premise that physical stores are now the best version of the brand inside the digital ecosystem, then that means you have to have an openness to allow the community in to have a say over what those experiences and what is the composition of that experience. So to your point, if you're in a community that these handful of things are important and special, the brand can't be rigid anymore where it's like cookie cutter. Here's my 10,000 square feet of X with tables folded with shirts and jeans at the back and da-da-da-da-da. Like, one, I think the consumers doesn't find that interesting, and it feels corporate and insincere at this point. I think, if anything, the brands that can figure out how to show up in a more conversational way and truly create a dialogue are going to be the ones that are successful. I think you're going to have a spectrum of experience. On one end, the brands that have the revenue and they're big enough, they're going to have big big experiential retail that's going to be fun and exciting, and people are going to go there to be entertained. I think on the other end, yeah, you're probably going to have a much more democratic experience that really tunes itself to the neighborhood and to the people, from a product assortment, from a knowledgeability of the staff to the people who work there. I mean, ideally they would be of the community, so I think it's not an either or, but I think the middle part, which is dead, is that cookie cutter 10,000 square foot kind of mall led concept. There's lots of brands who built their businesses around that have some reckoning to do right now.
Yeah, and I think they're the ones we're seeing, especially here in the UK, that are really struggling, because it goes back to that thing. There's no desire. There's nothing in it to visit. Like, you can,
Totally.
what do you get? And there has to be that whole reason to visit, really. On that, I suppose, how important do you see digital in those future experiences, and is that integral to a kind of the future of retail, or is it, how do you sort of see digital in that space, really?
I think it's impossible not to think about all future experiences without a technical component. And I don't view digital per se. There's kind of two types of digital, right? There's the overt capability of digital, like think big screens, think content. And then there's the kind of behind the scenes infrastructure, kind of an operating system of digital. The operating system, you could have a very human store where everything is conversational and there are no screens anywhere, and that could be the most digital store in the world because of the architecture that it's built on. So I think that will be modern retailing. That will be table stakes. The way every company will operate and run their business will be built on a digital foundation. That's from supply chain, how assortments get made, how product comes in, how friction fighting services, buy online, pick up in store, all that stuff, right? That's all kind of back of house. So every brand will have to have that. I think then there is a consumer facing engagement of digital and using technology to create engagement, where there might be, interactive community boards. There might be a whole host of kind of digitally powered experiences that maybe have a more of a overt tech piece. I think that part is more bespoke and probably is a nice to have, but isn't a must to have. But that's kind of how I look at it. And I kind of look at it like the invisible architecture, and then there's kind of like the initiative consumer facing stuff. But I don't see any company being able to be a modern brand without those investments and those requirements.
And it's when we're getting some comments in about when you talk of digital, there's some pieces that companies seem to think that digital means sticking a QR code or an iPad in the store, or like what innovation, what is for you, what is digital? I think what's retail digital, what is that?
I would say using digital to be more precise and personal with your brand. And like I said, the consumer might not ever feel that they're a part of a digital experience. I think in the past, when we said digital, exactly what the comment was, like plastering QR codes everywhere, just trying to make like overt tech experiences everywhere. And I've always said, like, hey, the last thing someone needs in a store is a 98-inch version of their phone, just playing the same content on their phone, looking back at them. Like, that's not valuable. If anything, it's tacky, and it doesn't really, you've got your phone in your pocket, you can do that stuff on your own. So not trying to just reproduce digital in a bigger version for the sake of saying digital, I think we've all experienced that. And I think we've all realized that's not valuable. The more, like I said, the more I think about digital, it's more supply chain led. It's more, Walmart did a concept store in New York a few years ago where they did all computer vision and all machine learning. And they basically just were able to assort the store down to the exact precision of exactly what people were. And this was like, kind of like it was in New York. It was kind of like a mini kind of pharmacy grocery store kind of, I think it was probably about 5,000 square feet. It wasn't like a huge giant store, but they were able to tune and curate the assortment, down to the exact individuals in that neighborhood that were shopping at that store. That was a very aggressive digital AI, computer vision, tech stack that delivered that experience. The people coming in the store probably didn't realize the cough syrup that they were ultimately being presented was tuned to whatever the cough syrup that people like in that neighborhood. But I think that's a great example of like using technology to deliver a more precise, personal experience, and then you add creativity on top of that. You add storytelling, you add a moment, and it just, I think, gives you the foundation to show up in a really meaningful way, especially when we start talking about communities and neighborhoods where things are really personal.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. I think probably the pandemic is going to accelerate all of this. The way we interact with brands and the way, probably what we want brands to deliver for us as well. We've all undergone a massive change, like a personal change in the last 9 months about our values and what we look for, and obviously, how do you sort of see us, or how do you see brands like connect? I think someone's put a really good point in that Nike performed highly during COVID. How did they use this sort of innovation to succeed? And I suppose how can brands, or how have good brands navigated the pandemic and sort of come out the end of it? What do you sort of see the future of brands really?
Well, I would hope that so brands can the pandemic accelerated digital commerce because nobody could leave their house. So that's just fundamentally like that behavior spiked because people were shelter at home, right? So the brands that had investments in their distribution systems could maximize those opportunities. So lots of brands made lots of money because they were able to meet the demand, right? I think there's an empathy post-pandemic that people are really looking to support each other. And I think when we come back into more of a human-to-human interaction, I think it's in the communities and the neighborhoods and in some of the privately owned stores. I feel that people are really going to support each other, hopefully, at a higher level. And I think the big brands, the Nikes of the world, all the big brands are really going to have to figure out okay, I've got to participate in this in an authentic way where it isn't just going to be about, commodification of my product and delivering it in one day. I'm going to have to now marry that with some emotion, some connection to people in a way that is bigger than just selling something. I know that's very philosophical sounding, but I think we as people aren't going to come out of this and just feel like I only want efficiency and fastest shipping for the rest of my life. We're going to want to connect with each other again, and we're going to want to support each other. At least I do.
Yeah, for sure. I do. I think it's all, there's so many things that I'm looking forward to, especially to getting back to, I don't think it's normal, but I hate the word new normal. I hate it like the terminology, because it's not, but it's about embracing those things that I think we've missed or realized that actually they're the things that turn us on, I suppose, in a way that make us tick. And silly
curiosity, it's our need for connection. All those things have not gone away. They've only increased. We've starved them.
I made a really stupid analogy about buying a coat, but there's something about really needed a coat, and I couldn't do it online because it didn't provide that buzz, that thing. I couldn't get it, and I couldn't fit. that's a silly analogy, but ultimately those things are being blown out for the future of what we're looking for. So yeah, I think Ian Scott's just asked here, do you think this empathy will remain after things return to normal, or do you think we'll all revert back to our old habits?
No, I think this, things are forever different. That doesn't mean that's a bad thing. I think they're just different. And I think what endures is our need to connect and be with each other and to be in physical space and participate in what you just said. You're like, I want to touch it, feel it. I want to have a conversation about it. I want to make a day out of it. I want to go have a drink afterwards or have lunch. I want to, like, that desire and all the things that are changing. I think that's just being intensified because we've been so contained for so long that I believe people are really crying out for that. And it's not just shopping. It's restaurants. It's everything. It's being able to just kind of, and look, we're going to have to do, our society has forever changed. There will be a new level of expectation around safety, around, how many people in a store, what are the cleaning protocols, like all that will just become normalized. Like we will just expect it. It won't be a big deal. We will become comfortable with a level of systems to interact in the world. And then once we normalize to that, that will be our new normal. You know what I mean? And I'm not terribly, sad about it not going. I have to accept, and I think being creative helps. Maybe we have an easier time looking to the future's uncertainty and not being totally put off by it, because I think we're always asking what if, and we're always excited about like, what if this new thing could do this, and what would that lead to? So for me, I am sad that there's some things I probably won't see anymore, but I'm probably more excited about what will this turn into, because I think there's a silver lining in all this. I know it's hard to say with so much death and tragedy, and I don't want to minimize anybody's impacts. I mean, I just had a 1 degree separation of positive COVID in my life just now. And, it's very scary. And, my whole family had to get tested. And so I don't want to minimize, but when we do kind of get back to a level, I think people are just they're gonna double down on a lot of the stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was thinking the other day, after the first sort of couple of months or weeks of sort of strangeness of the beginning of the pandemic, I don't think my brain's worked as hard as it probably has in the last 8 months. Like it's mad how you take, from a creative point of view, how you take something and then start thinking about, it's that challenging it's an opportunity to challenge the norm.
Yep.
For someone who, when you're constantly thinking about, how do you move things forward in a period like this, it's so exciting because everything is moving forward and at such a pace.
I agree. It'll force us to be better. It'll force us. I think it's going to make us more creative, think out of the box. It's going to make us more empathetic. It's going to create a lot of positive things.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, we screwed up, right? Like if you don't come out of this as an individual with some self-reflection and the ability to kind of like be critical of yourself and maybe make some changes, I think maybe you missed the point.
Yeah. Sure. And where do you sort of see, alongside that, there's a huge piece on sustainability, obviously environmental factors and all that. So that's all playing alongside this, these sort of personal feelings. And where do you sort of see the future of that, or how does that play out in kind of the retail world, I suppose?
Yeah, I love this question. I think probably one of the most areas that I was most passionate about in my recent work. I think, again, I think one thing that the pandemic has shown us as a society is the world is connected. So you can't have one group do one thing and not have it affect the other group. And I think this for me and what I've seen is that acknowledgement has direct implications to the way people think about sustainability. No longer sustainability a nice thing to have for North America and low on a value for another area. I think we all now see like, hey, your pollution's our pollution. And at the end of the day, we all live on this planet. So I love that there's consensus, feels like there's more momentum around the shared values of the planet. When it comes to retail, I just think that there's so much. So, you know, sustainability at retail used to be really, I would say, kind of crude. And, you know, the coolest version of sustainability was like really like LEED certified stuff. Like, can you, you know, kind of hard architecture, build a building. And those are really important criteria. But I now feel like the experience and the interior and the more soft architecture now, there's so much amazing material science that's been happening over the last couple of years that those environments are really like super exciting. I'll give an example. Even within Nike, we were taking a lot of the used shoes and reconstituting, grinding them up and creating, you know, really cool textured coverings and using a lot of post-factory waste to make scrims and environmental treatments. And it just had an amazing personality and it had amazing texture. I mean, I was so blown away with the material innovation that the team at Nike had done. It was really like, I would say one of the most creative, top performing teams in that company. And we were just taking direct footwear innovations and pulling it right into the retail environments. So it was unfortunate that, you know, this year, because of the pandemic, some of our biggest gestures and biggest experiences for that around Move to Zero, which is a big movement for us around our kind of sustainable efforts. A lot of those experiences never really got to the level they were supposed to. But we did a lot of really cool stuff, and it kind of made me feel like sustainability now is just part of what you do. It isn't really a decoration anymore. Like, and it's everything from, you know, the composition of the material, the ingredients, where does it get made? How close proximal is it to where it goes? Flat packing, there's so many dimensions that you really have to think about. The transit times, the life cycle. So after you use it, you don't want to throw it back in the rubbish bin. So how does it have, you know, the opportunity to be reborn back into another material? So there's just so much cool stuff happening. I mean, it's probably the stuff I care about most. Yeah,
I think it's so exciting to think how it's another challenge, isn't it? To think about how you can reuse or long. You know, when I started in the industry, you would just do something, you'd put it in, and then 4 weeks later you'd rip it out. But now it's about how you innovate that, so that yes, we understand we do see like it's seasonal, it's product, it launches, it's focused on a time moment thing, but how do you bring that to life over like you say, how do you kind of reuse something? How do you reinvent something? How do you bring it to life in a different way? And it kind of adds into that creativity about how you use space and material.
Absolutely. And some of that is just being like, sometimes like we get too fancy, and sometimes it's just about being smart and simple. And to your point, it's like, hey, can we build an initiative kit of parts that's sustainable materials, but it's meant to be reused, opposed to, you know what I mean? And I think that's just a more thoughtful, simple, pragmatic approach. Like, hey, you know, let's just make this with a vision for, you know, we can build all these different compositions out of a frame or whatever it is. And we're always not starting from scratch, because you know as well as I do how much stuff we just build and then chuck it. The whole thing just gets thrown away, and it's like $1 million worth of vinyl and plastic, and it's sad. It's like,
I think, and it shows the change of the retail, what I'd traditionally call the display industry, is changing massively to support that. I think in that a lot of the vision and the thoughts were very of a sort of moment. So you would, even down to the amount that you would throw out and you'd rip out because of Christmas windows and the amount of glitter and things like that. So it's about thinking through, alongside the brand own kind of ethos and stuff, how that would sort of transfix over a period of time. So on that, like, how do you, there's obviously what I get a lot of questions about from kind of people either in the industry or starting out in the kind of retail creative industry, as to where their sort of future lies. I think when I joined it, I became a sales associate and then kind of got into window displays and mannequin dressing, and obviously that's changed massively now. Where do you see sort of the role of a retail creative or a creative person in the industry?
Yeah, I think creative's more important than ever. And I think, like, look, I think it's probably safe to say there aren't going to be as many doors as there are now, right? Like the old model of, a large apparel manufacturer has this 10,000 square foot door, and the strategy was replicate that door everywhere, right? Like very, very small variants in what it is, like, and how it changes. Just drop that into every mall. Boom, 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 boom. Khakis, sweatshirts, whatever. I think, now that, like, the conversation we've been having today, there's less stores that are more bespoke and creative. That really, it isn't about, top down, one size fits all from some corporate, boardroom. It's really creative people curating the brand in these communities and spaces. That's, to me, like, never been a better time. Never been a better time to really do amazing work. I know that, like, I'm probably maybe a little optimistic and some people might not agree with me and they might think you're totally wrong. But I think, again, our culture is being so bombarded with so much information. It's information overload. What creativity does and what a strong point of view does is it gives people space. It gives people a place to actually engage and have a moment where they can participate and enjoy themselves. Like if retail stores are everything for everyone and they're just all over the place like they've been, I don't know if they matter enough for people to show up and want to participate. You know what I mean? So to make them matter, you've got to have amazing storytelling. You've got to have curation. You've got to have a two-way conversation between that community and that brand. So there's lots of programming. There's lots of engagement tactics that need to be put in place. And those need to be defined by both parties. It can't just be like, hey, we think you need a run club, and then that community tells you we hate running. Why do we want a run club? We want a training club. I'm making this up, but
yeah.
But I think the creatives are going to be the ones who kind of make that real. I don't think you're going to have a bunch of business operations people. That would be painful that would not be a great experience in my opinion.
Yeah. I sort of say to everyone, I feel like it's the time for the creators or the visuals or to kind of thrive again. I think there was a real moment that when I started in the industry, I loved it because it became visual and then slowly things, obviously they're the first to go. It feels like it's an added expense it's a kind of nice to have for a business. They can replace you with cardboard and printed materials and window graphics and all those kind of things, and all of a sudden it goes back to that store losing its personality, and those decisions you made as a creative were about the individual store.
Yep.
And that, what I totally agree with in terms of where the future lies is in trying to bring that personality back, and but on a much more community focused level. So I'm just reading through. There's like a million. I've got loads of questions today. So a lot of people commenting about your office. I've got office envy. Your office setup there is.
Oh, thank you. There it is.
There's some serious office envy. Yeah, lots of people asking about your record collection. Oh, look, now there's a wall of art.
Okay, so quick story. This was my kit. So this was like I'm in a basement with no windows, and it was my children's kind of like destroy anything in this room, kind of like go, like destruction room for crafts and painting and whatever. And then when COVID happened and we started working from home, I kind of took over half the room. So they weren't too happy, but I needed an office. And so I set up, I still play records, but I used to play a lot of records. And so I kind of made a little Home Depot DJ stand and, made some little crates and broke out the 1s and 2s and just it's been really nice just to play some records and just relax. I really missed it. So yeah, a lot of the vinyl is just like, a lot of early 90s, a lot of UK kind of Mo-Wax, that kind of stuff. A lot of kind of golden era hip hop, rare groove, just a bit of everything really. I mean, music collections are like the most, they go through phases,
It's the best thing of I love the move to all these sort of online communications mean we can see straight into someone's house. It's like the best thing I've got is this view into people's person, like you can see it, and you get a real sense of that person and their kind of personality behind, just from what is happening behind them. It's really interesting.
I've had my kids just saunter through the background in their pajamas so many times, like with chocolate on their face or whatever. Like I'm just like, oh hey, can you give me a minute?
So what's next for you then? What's next for Adrian? What future challenges are you looking most forward to?
That's such a great question. I was. It's kind of a funny story. I mean, when I started working at Nike, I thought, hey, you know what? I'll go. I'd never had a job. I was literally had my own design studio where I did a lot of freelance work and contract work, and I was like, fine, I'm gonna shut down my studio and go take this job at Nike, and I'll do it for 2 years, and I'll just try and suck everything in and then go back and do my thing. That turned into 12 years, unbelievable experience. So now I'm kind of at this crossroads again where it's a really amazing moment for me to kind of just take stock in myself and kind of think about what the last 12 years how they've shaped me and grown me. And what do I want to do now? Because sometimes in bigger corporations, you really get kind of like tunnel vision. You really get like obsessed on, and then you kind of bring your head up and you're like, oh my God, there's a whole world out here that I've been kind of, kind of hidden from. So one thing I've come to realize is that, whoever I work for next, I really want to have a higher purpose. And that's no diminishing of any of the great stuff I did at Nike. But I feel like whatever company, if it's sustainability driving them at a really high level, or there's some component of their business model that's really modern and progressive, that's good for the planet. I know that's very vague, but that's a little different than an existing company that tries to bolt on some new behaviors that are sustainable. So I'm I'm really looking at the world really through like, hey, what do I want to do and what's going to excite me personally? Those are kind of some of the filters I'm using to try and, just look at opportunities really. And I'm super excited about maybe jumping into an industry maybe that I haven't been in. I believe creativity, experience, all those things apply to everything in the world. You know what I mean? I would say they're as important to Nike as they are to Facebook, as they are to an automotive company, as they are to a food company. You know what I mean? So I definitely am excited by the idea of maybe applying some of my learnings to a non-athletic sporting goods company, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and we're all, everything's merging, isn't it? Like and the brands or retail, that whole kind of world is like you say, you just have to look at things like Tesla and like they're becoming brands in their own.
Right.
It doesn't have to be, like you say, an apparel brand or we're expecting experience, whatever we do, wherever we go. Whether we're going to buy a car or go to a restaurant, or I think all those things now, we're going to want enhanced personal connections with everything that we're doing.
Absolutely agree.
Amazon, and that's why we shop at Amazon, because you don't get that, and the man just turns up at the door with a brown box.
Yeah, and that's a different expectation.
And I think there's, that's what I get, excited about in terms of the future of, the creativity. There's so much in put on creative now that it just allows us to put a whole new sense of creativity on everything that we're doing.
I totally. Creativity is going to save the world.
I know you said about that in your podcast, didn't you? And I sort of loved that point that you said about the sort of creative. There will be the last remaining part of the kind of humanity that we've got. And you
can't fuck with creative, man. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, I think there's this, you can't define it either. I think that's the bit. It's really hard to define what it is. And if anyone ever asks me what I do, who doesn't work in the kind of this world, it's really hard to explain what you do. And I think there's a sort of famous clip that goes on about the role of the visual merchandiser, if that's even a thing. And people go, "Oh, you dress mannequins," and people go, "No, only I do. Like, I bring brands to life." So,
right.
Yeah, it's definitely the rise of that time. So, well, it's been a great nearly hour of time in here. I've had actually so many questions today. So what I might do afterwards is ping some across to you so that we can get them back to people. But it's been great. It's been a great first one to have of my first chat. It's been nice that I don't have to sit and chat on, and people have to listen to me rabbit on for 45 minutes. So it's been a pleasure to have it. So thanks, Adrian, for joining. Thanks for being my first guest. And I will keep up in contact, and we'll see where you're up to. What you're up to next. So that's great. Thanks everybody for joining. We will be back next week, I think. I don't know the topic or who's joining, but as always, we'll just completely freestyle it. So, but yeah, brilliant. Thanks everybody, and I shall see you all soon.
Thank you.
Cheers.